Hello and welcome to Feral Moon Designs, where today we're going to be making an evil pumpkin monster thing. Today we're going to be starting off with a pumpkin bone, a base that we may or may not use, and some aluminum foil, of course, to bulk out the body and build a base for our clay. So starting off, we'll take that aluminum foil and wrap it around that pumpkin bone, making sure to press it in nice and firm and compact so that there's not any bubbles or anything like that inside that can escape later on when we bake the clay. We'll check that with the base that we may or may not use, and the size looks good. So moving on, we'll take some tape and be sure to tape up that foil just so no loose ends fold up or end up bending out or anything like that. Now that we're done with that, we can start adding a layer of clay. I like to do this just to give myself a firm base to work with as opposed to trying to work with the clay. The Sculpey sticks to itself perfectly fine, so no big deal. I just need to be sure that I'm packing that clay in nice and firmly and that there's no air pockets that would explode when it bakes. Like I said, this is my first video here on YouTube, and I look forward to bringing my hobbies and creative endeavors as I learn new things and explore new projects and sharing them with all of you right here on Feral Moon Designs. Whether it be movie or video game inspired or a creation of my own, I'm sure we can make all sorts of fun things together. So if you're not subscribed yet, be sure to do so and come back later for more. Now, once we've baked that first layer, we can go ahead and start building out the actual form of the pumpkin. And what I'm going to do there is roll out these strands and press them out, and then start adding those to the sides to bulk out the sides to get some of that pumpkin shape. Making sure to, again, pack that in nice and smooth. And start forming the top of the pumpkin there where it kind of divots where the stem begins. This is probably the most tedious part at the very start of the sculpture, making sure everything's smooth and getting that form in the shape that I want. And from here, I'll go ahead and use my tools to mark off where I want the eyes and mouth to be so I have an idea of where I'm working. And I'll take my ball stylus and put the eye holes in. And from there, I'll kind of get an idea of what I want to do as far as the eyebrows and the general shape of the eyes. And now it's time to give this guy a mouth. So we'll go ahead and use another tool here to my scoop tool to kind of cut the shape of the mouth out and expose that baked core underneath. And we'll kind of smooth that in to form at least the framework for the jaws and the lips on the mouth. I'm by no means a sculpture expert or anything. So there's probably better ways to do all of these things, but this is how I do it. So it works, so that's what matters, right? Now we'll go ahead and roll out some clay so I can start forming the lower part of the jaw. And go ahead and start smoothing that into the base of the head. I find that the ball stylus, rolling that in, kind of helps smooth that and blend the clay. And I'll continue working on that until I get that to the shape that I want. From there, we'll go ahead and roll out some clay snakes. and I'll take my hobby knife and cut small little teeth as I roll the tip of that clay snake to form a little pointy edge.
One eternity later.
And after spending way too long cutting a bunch of tiny teeth, I will go ahead and roll 2 balls to use for the eyes. Now that those have baked, we can go ahead and proceed. Taking the head, which is not baked by the way, let's go ahead and see how these eyes fit, and as it turns out, they are way too big. So, using a saw off camera, I will go ahead and cut these into the size that I want. Check the fit, and wouldn't you know, it fits like a glove. With both evil pumpkin eyes secured, we can go ahead and tap those in place. Looking good. Using those clay snakes that we tested out earlier, we can go ahead and begin to form that actual eyebrow structure in the general shape of the eyes that I desire. And we'll go ahead and start smoothing those in and shaping them. And I'm realizing that he looks a lot like Oscar the Grouch, at least for the moment. That'll change very soon. Now, continuing to form the eyebrows and smooth all of that general facial structure in and shaping those brows, you can see it's starting to look a lot less like Oscar the Grouch, thankfully. We'll continue to work on getting that, just making sure that everything's blended properly and that the distinction between the eyeballs and the brows are not lost in the process. And using another clay snake now we'll use for the gums, we can place that on the lower jaw and start blending that in, making sure that it's in there nice and firm so that it doesn't fall out or anything like that down the road. This is actually going to act as a base for those teeth that we formed earlier, and we'll get to that here momentarily. And we can start placing those teeth. Now, using one of my tweezers, I can gently take those teeth and shove them up into his gums, which turned out to be a somewhat enjoyable process, to be honest. Now that the brows have been formed and our teeth are in place, we can continue to shape and form our pumpkin to the desired shape that we want, making sure it's all smooth and everything's to form. The next step is going to be adding all those grooves to our pumpkin, so using one of my rubber-tipped wedge tools, sure, that's what we'll call it, we'll go through and kind of wiggle that thing back and forth to create the desired effect. And if I do say so myself, this works out tremendously.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
And once we've got our pumpkin cracks in place and up to snuff, we can move on and roll out another clay snake and apply that as the lower and top lips. I'll make sure to blend those in with the facial structure real well and shape them as I so choose. And with our pumpkin lips in place, we'll go through and correct any mishaps that we had with these pumpkin cracks. Adding a little bit more depth and detail along the way. And using that same tool, I can go into the lips and add some cracks and little partitions here and there. With this being my first video, I am going to be working with a few methods, just testing out the process of making videos of this nature. This is new to me, although video production is not. The methods of which I've used to capture this footage and edit this together are most certainly new, so bear with me. I'll be working on figuring out what my preferred camera angle is and all of that. Now on to adding that stem. We'll go ahead and put some clay on top of that pumpkin bone, twist it around and add some textures with our tools. Going over it with the ball stylus when it's all said and done, and I'm pretty happy with the texture that came out of this. With our pumpkin hat stem in place, we can move on to more detail work and add some little balls and divots into the pumpkin surface for some weather marks and pumpkin pimples. In the process of doing so, I'll be sure to go over the entire surface of the pumpkin, making sure all the details are in place that I'm happy with, no imperfections, fingerprints, the whole 9 yards. Anything I can spot with my naked eye, I'm going to try to correct at this point. And once I'm happy with the final results, I'll take some isopropyl alcohol, gently brush it over the surface to remove any remaining fingerprints before we put it in the oven for one final bake. And once my final bake was complete, I realized at this point I really screwed myself in deviating from my original sketch, specifically when it comes to painting the mouth. But with a little ingenuity, I decide to use a dropper to add some watered down black paint in there, and look what happens. Overnight it dries and it worked just fine. Of course it made a mess, but at this point it doesn't really matter because we'll be going over that with base coats and whatnot, so it's fine. Now from here, we're going to start applying that base coat. I'm going to use a darkened orange, basically mixing some orange and brown to add a nice darker contrast underneath. Once that base coat is in place, we can go ahead and start adding some crimson red on the eyes, just to get a nice base on that as well. And off camera, I added a base coat of white on the teeth just to keep up with it as it got messy from the black paint and the gum painting and all of that. This is a very painstaking process, trying to get down into the cracks and cover the entire surface of the eye, and once I'm done, I'll complete the same process on the other eye, of course. And once we're done with the eyes, we'll move on to add a little more white to the teeth to kind of touch up some places where we got base coat on the teeth before. And finally, we'll be taking a dark wash and going through all of the cracks and all the nooks and crannies to really bring out a shading effect on our pumpkin. Now for the wash, I'm using a touch of purple with my black mixture, and I'm really happy with how this came out. Not only do I apply it to the pumpkin, but I'll apply a little bit of that dark wash around the eyes too before going back in with that crimson red, and starting at the middle, I'll kind of fan outward along the entire surface of the eye to allow some natural shading as that paint thins. Originally, I was going to add some black pupils, but I'm very glad that I didn't. I'm quite happy with the look of the solid red on the eyes. And of course, we'll repeat that process on both of the eyes. And from here, we can start making our pumpkin a little more orange. What I did not want was a bright orange. I wanted a more desaturated look. So what we're going to do is take a orange with a little bit of brown, a lighter brown mixed in this time. And we're going to kind of dab this onto the surface and brush it in nice and evenly as possible to create a desaturated orange that I'm quite fond of once it's done. As you can see, that orange is really coming out now. Things are coming together. And we'll go ahead and apply a little bit of a grimy wash to the teeth to desaturate that white to some extent. I don't want to go too dark because I do want the teeth to stand out, but I also don't want them to be perfectly white. And from there, it's on to painting the stem. We'll just use a simple dark brown, the darkest brown I have. Followed by touching up some of those pumpkin warts. Adding a little color and variety to those. And with those pumpkin pimples painted, we can move on to one of the next to last steps, adding a little bit of a matte varnish to protect that paint. And my favorite step of all will be taking a little bit of UV resin, applying it to those eyeballs. And using my UV flashlight will cure that. And that UV resin really brings out the eyes, adds that sheer and the shine, and I love it. I love it. And with that, I guess there's nothing left to do but move on to the showcase. That brings us to the end of today's video and a final look at today's completed evil pumpkin monster thing. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that like button. It helps get that video out in front of other faces. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This may be the first video I've done, but there's plenty more to come. I'm looking forward to sharing this hobby and this journey with all of you. And again, I'm no expert here. This is just something that I enjoy doing. I want to learn new things and bring them right here to this channel and share that with all of you. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, again, hit that like button. We'll see you back here next time. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram. Links in the description box below. Guys, have a great Halloween. And until next time, you take care.